Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. In about 6 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 18 seconds, we're gonna go into the Path of Exile 321 Crucible League. And for me personally, the league looks very, very interesting to say the least, because people are playing Path of Exile for all kinds of reasons, besides, like, most importantly, having fun, right? But I'm talking about the way you play Path of Exile. Some are like boss farmers, some are like crafters, some are like, like whatever you find fun in the game. And for me, it is definitely like trying out builds, trying out different item combinations, synergies, and stuff like that, and just trying to make fancy builds, in my opinion, right? And Crucible most likely will deliver exactly that. So here is my big problem, or my concern about the league, is I personally think that what I'm going to play will be decided by what kind of Atlas or weapon passive trees, Crucible trees, we're gonna have. We have seen a couple of spoilers in the trailers, in the Q&A and whatnot, where it said, for example, I think it was Freezing Pulse and Eye of Winter or Winter Orb can poison, for example, right? Or was it Stonebrand and Armageddon Brand can attach to your Summon Reaper, which kind of sounds fun to me, because just imagine you have like the Summon Reaper, which I have never played, but I would just act it as like a mobile brand, right? So just thinking about you skill the mastery where your brand jumps like every 0.3 seconds or something to a new enemy, right? So your Reaper will always walk to the enemies or run to the enemies, no, doesn't matter. And the brand will jump off it, will kill the pack, and then when it's back on the floor, it will jump back on the Reaper because it is a target that a brand can attach to. And what happens is the brand will just stay on the Reaper, and the Reaper will just walk to the next pack, and it will jump down, and like just having like a mobile brand, which sounds kind of interesting, but definitely not something for League Start. But what I want to say with that is, I think that there is going to be some special ways of making builds or new builds that weren't possible before, just the way the Crucible endgame trees will work. But this is some later stage thinking, just because you need to probably to have certain items or item levels to unlock certain skills that we just don't know about it yet, right? We kind of have to wait until PoEDB or something like that will release or data mine the entire, like, what can be on these things, to then say, like, hey, if I'm gonna find this keystone, then this skill will interact completely different in a way that doesn't work usually, and then we can make a build around it, okay? So this is just like why I think it's gonna be a bit weird to choose like a league starter in that case, because it most likely will turn down to the point that I'm gonna find something where I say, yo, this sounds fun, this node, so I'm gonna make a build around it, right? But here I am talking about some league starter ideas, what I consider for league starting in 321. None of these builds that I'm going to mention here are going to be specifically overpowered. It's not going to be meta. It's not going to be your typical top 5 builds of 321 Crucible, that kind of thing. I just want to go over certain builds in the past that I really enjoy, that I think might have or might going to be a lot stronger in this patch with certain variations of skill trees, or just because I really enjoyed those kind of builds and I want to like go back to these builds and just play them again, right? And the first thing that popped into my mind when I watched the Crucible trailer was the Manaforged arrow support, okay? Which let me instantly think, without reading what it actually does, is like, yo, is this like Archmage for bow attacks or attacks in general, right? Or in this case, bow attacks, because it's a Manaforged arrow support, not attack support, right? And some people might know or may remember that I was playing around with a Mind of a Matter, Agnostic, mana stacking, Mind of the Council, Raider, Burning Arrow. With, what is the ring called? Stormfire Ring, I think, where your lightning damage can actually ignite. So you could play this easily on an Elementalist, but I always pick the Raider in League Start. I don't know why. I think Raider is actually one of the worst ascendancies, more or less, just because, I mean, it's super nice, super generic quality of life things on League Start, with like phasing, with onslaught, with like ailment immunity, and all these kind of things. But at some point in the league, when you make better characters, where you have like your elusive tailwind onslaught boots and stuff like that, I think Raider falls extremely off unless you go like Frenzy Charge stacking, right? It does have a lot of quality of life, which essentially helps you on League start, but for endgame, I think like Raider is like one of the worst, but doesn't really matter. My idea was like, I was playing this kind of character back in 340, was this Ultimatum League or something? And it used the classical mana stacking things, like the Cloak of Defiance and stuff like that, and it was just Burning Arrow, just built completely different with mana stacking. And what makes this possible is the Mind of the Council helmet. Let me quickly pause this. Let's see over here. The Mind of the Council, let me scroll in here. What it does is like, attack skills have added lightning damage equal to 6% of your mana, which is basically means that every attack will have higher mana cost, but therefore gets added lightning damage. And with a Stormfire Ring, you can ignite with the lightning damage that you can get, right? And when I heard about the Storm Manaforged arrow support, I was like, wait a second, what is this, right? Turns out it works a little bit different than I was thinking. It's like support a bow attack skill, causing them to trigger when you've spent an amount of total mana on other bow attacks based on the supported skill's mana cost. Supported skills deal more damage based on their mana cost overall. So what that basically means for me is you would run around with, like, for example, Burning Arrow, and you would have like a 6-link, any other like bow skill or a secondary Burning Arrow or something like that, no matter what you want to use. And once you spend enough mana with your main attack, which will be quite easy to reach with something like the Mind of the Council, that you will every like X amount of seconds will fire off like a mana infused special damage arrow or something like that. It's just like the question, like what kind of item combination or skill combination could take use of that. So it's more like you have your like your normal Burning Arrow playstyle, and then maybe just add some other form of like arrow or something that will significantly boost your single target damage, as well as a new skill gem that got released, which is not really new. It is the Snipe skill. So people know it from the Exile helmet, which is basically a channeling skill. So whatever skill you're gonna link it with, you can channel up, and I think it's like 6 stages, and every stage will give like 120% more damage with ailments or 150% more damage with hits. But I always use it on my Bleedpale Bow Gladiator, for example, right? So a dedicated channeling skill to get like ridiculous amounts of more damage for a single target. And the addition to with Snipe on something like a Burning Arrow build could actually help out with the single target, because with a build like that, clearing is ridiculous. I'm just gonna like, I don't know, why do I not press play here while I'm talking here, right? So we can like watch a little bit of this like Burning Arrow playstyle. But I think it is still pretty one of the coolest builds. It's not like by far any of like the strongest build ever, but just from the enjoyment playstyle, it was like very good. And now with maybe the addition to like Manaforged arrow support and Snipe, we could potentially get this build to a very decent state. Good thing about mana builds is nobody plays them. We know that mana is not in the best state, like mana stacking in general, and that's also why all the items are relatively cheap for what you can reach. So I would say for like a 10 or 15 divines, you could make a very solid mana stacking character. But if you say like, hey, I have 100 divines laying around, there is probably a lot better characters that you could play around with, but I would not really call them league starters at this point. So this would be one of the builds that I would be interested in. Next on the list is Rage Vortex Berserker. The reason why I think like Rage Vortex might be fun, there wasn't really a lot of like changes overall when it comes to masteries and stuff like that. But when I played Rage Vortex back, it was 315, I think it was like Expedition League. I think it was a league even when this skill got released. I had a lot of fun with this skill. So basically how it works, you have Rage, and Rage Vortex will consume a certain amount of this rage and create like a spinning version of your weapon, and this thing deals like hilarious amounts of damage. So in the mapping aspect, you shoot out this like massive, or based on your rage basically. Look how fucking big my character is. This is like Uber Elder back in the days. Well, like a bit like more of an endgame thing, right? But if it doesn't one-shot the monster, it will slow down, so it's perfectly suited for a kind of like single target setup, and you can basically just exert your attacks and the exerted attacks will count for the entire duration. So if I'm gonna use like Intimidating Cry, doubling my damage, and I shoot out this Rage Vortex, the double damage will count for the entire duration of this Rage Vortex and not just for the first attack out of like 100 of hits that this thing is gonna do. I think like at some point you with like Blitz Charge you have like an attack rate of like 20 or 25 attacks per second, and this thing lasts for a couple seconds, so it's more than 100 hits with each thing, right? And what is good about it is it is a melee build that actually kind of works like a dot build, because you're shooting out this like massive Rage Vortex and it will just stay there stationary on the boss and will spin for a certain duration, while you can like freely move and dodge things. So that's why I say like it kind of acts like, or it feels like a damage over time build when it comes to bosses. And I would say, based on my experience back in the days, mapping I would say is a solid 8 out of 10, so it's not the undisputed best mapping build, but I could see if you play this build with a Voidforge and the Explodey Flask that got released last league, I think you can easily turn this into a 9 out of 10 clearing skill. But I think it really shines when it comes to bosses, and usually I'm playing more of I am usually more of the mapping kind of guy. That's why my characters, my League starters are usually the mapping ones, right? But that also means that it's very hard for me to finish the entire Atlas, or at least I do the Atlas, right, with the quest invitation, stuff like that. But when it comes to like the feared invitation, stuff like that, I usually have to ask somebody to carry me for this, because my League starters are usually not capable of doing so, but I think this build would be one. Another thing why I'm interested in this build is because back in the days, you were bound to the Red Blade Banner shield. It was like this red big shield, which said when you're below 25 rage, I think, and you would use a War Cry, you're instantly getting full rage again. So what that means in the terms of like bossing aspect, you need to go in, you have to like kind of spend all your rage, and before the boss gets active, you need to War Cry to have a maximum rage, kind of like Rage Vortex. The way I would build it nowadays is with the Chaos Spirit Gloves, the new gloves that got released, I don't know, like 1 or 2 leaks ago, which essentially turns your life regeneration into rage generation. So back from the days with like Chainbreaker and stuff, how this used to be, but Chainbreaker nowadays is just so utterly garbage. But the Chaos Spirit Gloves might seem the perfect item for a build like that, to just have like this. Wait, let me actually quickly pause the inventory here, so you can actually see like the Red Blade Banner and stuff, because there were like, this is like mandatory, right, with a rage belt to just have like more overall rage and stuff. But I think going with like a Voidforge, a two-handed weapon with the Chaos Spirit Gloves might be a lot of like smoother playstyle, because this like War Cry Red Blade Banner thingy was the only kind of like downside that I felt like when I was playing the build back in the day. So maybe with a new take on it, it might be a lot of fun, and I think it can potentially be a very good League starter overall, because it has like some ridiculous, like one of the craziest damage outputs that you can reach for like single target without like investing, I don't know, like 20 mirrors or something, right? So next build on the list is, oh yeah, good old Herald of Thunder Autobomber. So I like my Autobombers, and this video is from, I think it was Heist League, so there is still the Exploded chest in there, but nowadays you would definitely take a look at the Impulsor chest as a substitution for the Exploded chest, right? And if you go like super simple setup, Storm Secret Rings, an Impulsor, the Storms, what is it, the gloves, what was it called? Storm's Gift. You have like a super easy quality of life Autobomber for super speedy mapping, and you even have the potential to scale this build up to a point where it can clear 100% daily maps, okay? So there is definitely the scaling in there. What I think is a bit awkward is, how do you start a build like that? I mean, it's a no-brainer if you just say like, you know what, you know, I just freaking play Stonebrand or something until I can make the conversion, because I think Autobombers in that case, like Fireburst was my last build of Sanctum League, and I like put in quite some currency in there, and it was a lot of fun, and I even hit Ignite Cap on Fireburst, which is ridiculous, but at a what cost, right? So I think overall, Herald of Thunder Autobomber still remains the best kind of Autobomber if we don't take into account like the static strike. I think from Palsteron, this looks very, very cool, very satisfying to play. But as a strength stacker with the replica Alberon's Warpath and so on, the prices last league were absolutely ridiculous. So there is like no way to even consider that like a strength stacking character on league start, just because like the boots will most likely go for like 30-40 divine on its own, and you know, that's like maybe a second or third build of the league. But overall, I think Herald of Thunder remains the best kind of Autobomber, even compared to the past leagues. Even though I have to say, I would really fucking love to play like old school Autobombers with Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice, and I actually did that back, I think, in Heist, in Harvest League, where I said like, I want to go old school, like really old school, the kind of like Herald of Thunder, Herald of Ice chain reaction, kind of like alternating, kind of like synergy, right? But the problem nowadays with these builds, it worked back in the days at a mediocre stage, and it was Harvest League, and there was like one of the craziest kind of like builds or equipment parts, like every item 6 times perfectly divine T1 items, right? And as I said, back in the days, it was like mediocre at best, right? But I tried it back in the days. The problem nowadays is just like you have to focus on like a certain damage source to get like really good damage. And the way Herald scale is like, there is only a very few ways to actually scale the Herald damage. And you also want to make it like crit based to actually have like this nice chain explosion with freezing the enemies and stuff like that. And in nowadays world, it's just way too low damage overall to have like a satisfying clearing experience. Because if you think back in the days, if your character had like 1 million or 2 million Shaper DPS, you were fine to do all content, right? Nowadays, if you have like 2 million DPS, it's like, bro, what you gonna do with that, right? You're gonna be like kind of stuck in like tier 16 maps. You're probably gonna fail your first Conquerors, or maybe even the Pinnacle boss or something like that. So back in the days, it was nice. We still don't really have like decent ways to get like the damage up to a certain point. That's why I say like a solo Herald of Thunder build has like a lot more single target on top of that, and the clearing is actually even better with like Impulsor Storm's Gift. But this would be the one that I would pick if I would say, yo, I'm feeling auto-bombing on league start, so that would be my choice to go. And next build that really surprised me when I played it was the Death Oath Caustic Arrow Occultist. So I played this build in, what was it, 318? That was Sentinel League, as far as I remember. I think it was Sentinel. And the goal from this build was just like, hey, I want to have a magic finder that is like kind of an Autobomber. I just want to run around in like Crimson Temple and farm Mageblood cards, right? That was the intention of the build, and I always said like, Death Oath is for me the little brother of Righteous Fire that is kind of similar to Righteous Fire but has less scaling in the end game, and the best builds in like Righteous Fire wise, right, can take on all end game. But surprisingly, this build was a lot stronger than I expected it to be, and I was playing it as a Magic Find and was like super happy with the result. So thinking about making this as an actual Death Oath character, I think it might take on the end game, just because we do have now, or use the Caustic Arrow for dedicated single target DPS. So the way it would work, you just run around, kill everything with Death Oath. You have like your Asenath's Gentle Touch. For explosions, you have like Herald of Ash that you can opt in, you have the Profane Bloom, so just walking around and just kill stuff. And if there is like any monsters, map bosses, conquerors, or endgame bosses, you have a 6-link Caustic Arrow that is dealing quite a lot of damage, and I was like surprised on how chill this build was. And overall, for the building this character, I don't see a point where this build would become very expensive. I think Death Oath is something you can even farm with divination cards in solo self-found, so I don't see a reason why this shouldn't work early on in the league. The only problem is when it comes to like cluster jewels, because a lot of like dot builds overall, doesn't matter if it's Ignite, if it's Chaos Dot, if it's like those kind of things, they just you know, it's easy to league start these characters, and they will have like probably set like decent amount of damage to actually go for the Atlas clear and stuff like that. But once you go like one step higher, you have to invest into cluster jewels, and all these like triple chaos damage cluster jewels, the medium cluster jewels and stuff like that. They can get very expensive. And I remember I was spending, I think it was like about a 20 divines on my character back in the days. I uploaded the video, I told people like, yo, this is a cool build, you can definitely play that, it's super enjoyable. And all of a sudden, just like buying like 2 medium cluster jewels was worth more than what I spent in the entire build. So I see this could be a problem early on, and that cluster jewels and stuff like that will be just way too expensive. But in the end of the day, if you reach like 1 million DPS with Death Oath, or like even 500k, and you have like a 6-link or 5-link Caustic arrow, it should be fair enough to take on the early content. I'm not talking about Uber bosses in specific, because I think killing Uber bosses is not really a league starter thing, but for doing like the quest searing Exile and stuff like that, it should work in clearing the entire content, because it is a chaos build, and chaos builds do actually have an easy time when it comes to like clearing maps, just because they're not really reliant on any kind of map modifiers. Alley Reflag, Fizz Reflag, whatever map mods there are, chaos builds usually have an easy time completing all of them, which can come in handy with the new Forge items, or basically Forge tokens, where you enter the Crucible Forge, or whatever it's called, call it Forge of the Ancients. So if they roll with bad modifiers, a Chaos build will most likely be able to do those kind of things, even when it rolls like, I don't know, like 100% life is extra ES, Chaos damage bypasses ES, so that's not even a big downside either. And the last build that I want to talk about that I consider for League starting in 321 Crucible is actually Bleedpale Bow Gladiator, or better said, Bleedpale character. So there has been a lot of changes to masteries over like everywhere, right? There's like new things, some things got removed. Sadly, like I think they even removed this +1 chain for non-projectile skill on lightning masteries for like Stonebrand and stuff, right? Which is super sad, because this is one of the things that I think is like really, really insane. Now it's gone, but we have other things. For example, in the physical mastery, we do have 6% dot multi for bleeding per impale on the enemy. So if you play a Bleedpale character, it's like, you know, there's like actually two completely different things. One is a dot, and the other one is like an on-hit thing. So the way Impale works, as a quick reminder, you attack once, you inflict an Impale, then the Impale will last for a certain amount of hits, and the next time you hit, you will consume that Impale, or at least like 1 stack of this Impale, and add it to your damage. So the more often you attack until you have like 7 or whatever is your maximum Impale, you will just a good Impale build will basically more or less double your damage, right? You have like 100% damage, and then you get like another like, I don't know, like 80% with increased effect of Impale, extra damage just from the Impale. So in the end of the day, you will have like 180% damage instead of 100% if you would just attack the enemy, right? Which is kind of counterproductive to an entire dot build, because a dot build isn't really relying on like hitting the enemy multiple times. But what you can do with that is that you can like play both an on-hit and extra bleed damage in the way that you would scale it, that the bleeds are doing a majority of damage, but for the sake of single target, you could stack up the impales and have like extra damage on top of that. And don't forget about the snipe support. So to have a certain single target on bleed builds, you have to play with a snipe helmet, right? But now we have snipe as a skill, and this would mean that we could play a 6-link snipe setup. Obviously, it would be a 5-link, because you still want to play with, what is it? Not Rupture. Freaking single target bleed thingy, split aura and puncture, that's the word, puncture. So snipe with puncture is crazy single target damage, right? And if we opt in some maybe faster attacks, I don't know, maybe like tornado shot, but then you would most likely not go with like a pure bleed build. I would more say Crimson Dance, for example, where you have like 8 stacks of bleeds and with Impale on top. So maybe like Tornado Shot, Bleed, Impale or something like that might be something that would be worth considering, since we would technically, if we need to, have a dedicated snipe single target setup, something like that. I don't know. So there is other things that make it even tankier, because I played my version with Gray's Determination, Defiance Banner, and now there's like even a mastery that you have like increased armor per endurance charge, increased evasion per frenzy charge, I think. It's like, I don't know where I saw this one, but it will definitely up your defense by quite a margin. What I had the problem with this build was like that the clearing was satisfying, especially with the bleed pops and stuff like that, and dot builds are not the hardest to scale, especially when you play something like Gladiator. You have the free explosions and stuff like that. It is a fast build with arena challenger charges. I made it quite tanky, as I said, with Gray's Determination, with Fortify and stuff like that. So I played it like 2 days and I was like level 96 by just mapping around. So I wasn't really dying at all, but I felt like the single target, the snipe playstyle was a bit awkward. But I think now with like additional skills and the option to have a rare helmet, because I think all with like the Searing Exarch and Uber Eater implicits are quite strong in my opinion. And losing one of that for the sake of just getting sniped to have some form of single target will make it like a lot better nowadays if you can go for like some really nice crafted helmets and just take like your 6-link snipe to even have more single target damage while just having an overall better product, right? And I'm not sure, like CF would be also like quite nice, but you know, when I play Bleed Bow, it's like, you know, a trip back the memory lane, and now seeing the potentials that we have, and especially with this new altars like weapon trees, with the Crucible trees, there might be some nice synergies with certain attacks like Split Arrow or Puncture or something like that that haven't been discovered yet or not public yet. So I'm really looking forward on what we can see on these things, what kind of builds we can play. But these would be the first glance of like my 5 potential league starters. These can obviously change. I mean, just GGG could release a crazy freaking new unique tomorrow where I would say, wait a second, this might be super cool with this and that. So what will happen is in the upcoming days, GGG will announce more skill gems, maybe Val Ice Shot or something, maybe make an Ice Shot character or something. More uniques that we could play around. But overall, I can only make my final decision on League Starter like probably on Wednesday next week or something, and this will then come with a dedicated like how to level the build kind of style with a PUB. But now this video is just for like giving some ideas on like what you could probably start as well, because this is like what bopped into my head for when I saw the Crucible thingy. But let me know in the comments what your league starter might be or might not be, some just fancy ideas, because I think having fun in the game is way more interesting than just playing whatever is meta, whatever like is gonna be the strongest, because I think in the end of the day it doesn't really matter as long as you enjoy the skill that you're playing, even though it's not meta, it's not the strongest, not the best, whatever, it's still gonna help you more enjoying the game because it's a grindy game. So whatever you do, just try to have fun, and that's pretty much it. And I stand by this rule, and I will just continue this way. Alright guys, thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.